While premium laptops have gotten more expensive over time, cheap and budget options have improved significantly in quality. You can easily find some great devices that provide a satisfying user experience, from dirt cheap under $300 Chromebooks to budget gaming laptops with a dedicated GPU costing up to $1,200. The list is short for now, but it'll grow as we review more laptops. In this video, we will look at the 7 best cheap and budget laptops 2022 available on the market today. We made this list based on our personal opinion, hours of research and customer reviews. We've considered their quality, durability, features, and more. If you want more information and updated pricing on the products mentioned, check the links in the description box below. So let's dive into the video. Number 7. Lenovo Chromebook C34015. The Lenovo Chromebook C34015 is a 2-in-1 convertible laptop with a 360-degree hinge. It has a thin profile that makes it portable, and it feels impressively well built, with a finish that doesn't scratch easily. Its battery life is outstanding, lasting over 12 hours of light productivity and nearly 8 hours of video playback. The keyboard feels great to type on for extended periods, and although the touchpad is small, it's responsive to all movements and gestures. As it's a Chrome OS device with a low-power Intel CPU, it can only handle simple tasks like web browsing and media consumption, so it isn't ideal for any demanding workloads like video editing or 3D animation. Unfortunately, the display looks washed out and doesn't get bright enough to combat glare. Also, the webcam's image looks dim, and audio through the microphone sounds staticky. Our Lenovo C34015 has an Intel Core i3-8130U CPU with Intel UHD graphics, 620 4GB of RAM, and 64GB of storage. There are models equipped with an Intel Pentium Gold 4417U, which we expect will be slightly slower, though not significantly. The memory isn't configurable, but you can choose between 32GB or 64GB of storage. The Lenovo Chromebook C340 is good for school use. It's a well-built laptop that's easy to carry around thanks to its thin profile, and it has a battery that lasts easily through a typical school day with plenty of charge to spare. The keyboard feels great to type on, and the touchpad is responsive to all movements and gestures even though it's a bit small. Its Intel CPU is powerful enough to handle general productivity tasks like web browsing and text formatting. However, it isn't ideal for demanding workloads, which might disappoint students in more technical fields like 3D animation or engineering. The Lenovo Chromebook C340 is bad for gaming. You can only configure it with a low-power CPU and integrated graphics, which are only powerful enough to handle mobile games from the Google Play Store. Additionally, it has a 60Hz display with a slow response time, and because it runs Chrome OS, you can't install any DirectX games. On the upside, its thermal and noise performance is outstanding as it doesn't get hot or loud under load. The Lenovo Chromebook C340 is decent for media consumption. As it's a 2-in-1 convertible, you can view content in tent or tablet mode to save space, which might come in handy on flights with tiny table trays. The battery life for video playback is outstanding, lasting long enough to get you through at least a couple of movies and TV show episodes. Unfortunately, the display looks washed out and doesn't get bright enough to overcome glare in well-lit settings. Also, while the speakers sound decent overall, they don't get very loud. The Lenovo Chromebook C340 is bad for use as a workstation. It runs Chrome OS, meaning you can't install any x86 applications. Even if you can run Linux programs in a container, it doesn't have enough processing power to handle demanding workloads like video editing or 3D animation. It's also limited to 4GB of RAM and has a slow storage drive. It doesn't get hot or loud under load, though, and it has a reasonable number of ports. The Lenovo Chromebook C340 is okay for business use. It has a thin profile that makes it portable, and its battery lasts easily through a typical 8-hour day of light productivity with plenty to spare. The keyboard doesn't feel tiring to type on for extended periods, and although the touchpad is a bit small, it tracks movements and gestures well. Its Intel CPU can handle light productivity tasks like text formatting and web browsing, but it isn't ideal for demanding workloads. Unfortunately, the webcam's video quality is only passable as the image is underexposed, and the microphone sounds quiet. Number 6. Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3. The Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 is a 15.6-inch budget gaming laptop. Like many gaming laptops in its price range, such as the HP Victus 16, it's available with powerful CPU and very capable GPU options. However, it compromises in other aspects to make it more affordable. This model has AMD Ryzen 5000 CPU and NVIDIA dedicated GPU options, but there are also models with Intel 11th Gen CPUs, under the model name Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3i. The AMD Ryzen 7 5800H and NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 configuration we tested can deliver a good gaming experience. But its 8GB of memory in a single-channel configuration severely limits its performance, leading to lower than expected frame rates in games, so you need to make sure to get 16GB of memory in dual-channel mode to get the most performance out of the CPU and GPU. Our Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 has an AMD Ryzen 7 5800H CPU, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 dedicated GPU, 8GB of memory, and 1256 GB of storage in the form of a 256 GB PCIe NVMe SSD and a 1TB 5400 RPM hard drive. You can also configure the laptop with an AMD Ryzen 5 5600H, which isn't as fast as the Ryzen 7 5800H but still powerful enough to provide smooth gameplay. As for the GPU, the entry-level NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1650 is the lowest-end option and can achieve around 60 frames per second at 1080p, though you'll have to play at low settings in most games. The NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 and RTX 3050 Ti are a decent step up from the GTX 1650 and perform fairly similarly, with the RTX 3050 Ti being only marginally better than the 3050. Both GPUs can get around or slightly over 60 frames per second at high settings. The NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060 is the highest-end configuration and will provide the best performance, with average frame rates around 80 to 100 frames per second at 1080p. The Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 is okay for school use. It's a little bulky and heavy, so it isn't the most portable, and its battery only lasts around 5 hours of light productivity, which means you'll have to bring the charger with you. The keyboard feels comfortable to type on for extended periods, and the touchpad tracks all movements and gestures well. Its AMD Ryzen CPU and NVIDIA dedicated GPU can handle all types of workloads, including demanding tasks like graphic design and 3D animation. The display is decently sharp and provides enough space for multitasking, but it doesn't get bright enough to combat glare and looks slightly washed out. Unfortunately, you can't use its USB-C port to charge the laptop or output a video signal to an external display. The Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 is good for gaming. Its AMD Ryzen CPU and NVIDIA dedicated GPU can deliver a smooth gaming experience at 1080p, though you have to make sure to get 16GB of memory as the 8GB configuration will result in lower frame rates and frequent stutters. Thankfully, it's easy to access the internals for upgrades, so you can do it yourself later on. Its 120Hz display delivers a relatively clear image in fast-moving scenes, however, its slow response time causes noticeable ghosting. There's a 165Hz panel option available if you want even smoother gameplay, though you'll need to go up to an RTX 3060 to make the most of it. The performance over time is outstanding as there's only a small amount of thermal throttling on the CPU and none on the GPU, but the fans get pretty loud under load. The Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 is mediocre for media consumption. It isn't very portable as it's a little bulky and heavy, and its battery only lasts about 3 hours of video playback. The speakers sound fairly natural and well balanced, but they don't have much bass to produce a thumping sound and don't get very loud. The 60Hz and 120Hz display options look washed out due to their narrow color gamuts, but you can get a 165Hz panel with full sRGB coverage, which will look much better. Unfortunately, all the display options are IPS panels with low contrast, which aren't ideal for dark room viewing. The Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 is great as a workstation. Its AMD Ryzen CPU and NVIDIA dedicated GPU can handle demanding workloads like video editing, 3D animation, and graphic design. Its performance over time is outstanding as there's only a little bit of thermal throttling on the CPU and none on the GPU, although the fans are fairly loud under load. Sadly, the port selection is mediocre as its single USB-C port doesn't support charging or video output and can only transfer data at USB 3.2 Gen 1 speed of up to 5 gigabits per second. The Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 is decent for business use. It feels well built even though it's entirely plastic, but it's a bit bulky and heavy, so it isn't the easiest thing to carry around. Also, its battery lasts only about 5 hours, which means you'll have to bring the proprietary charger with you because you can't charge the laptop via USB-C. The keyboard feels comfortable to type on and doesn't cause fatigue, the touchpad tracks all movements and gestures well, and the webcam captures a decent image for video calls. Its AMD Ryzen CPU can easily handle most productivity tasks like text formatting, web browsing, spreadsheets, and presentations. The display is decently sharp and provides plenty of space for multitasking, but it doesn't get bright enough to combat glare. Number 5. Acer Swift 314. The Acer Swift 314 is a Windows laptop available with Intel 11th Gen processors. It's thin and lightweight, making it easy to carry around, and its battery lasts over 13 hours of light productivity and 12 hours of video playback. It has a reasonably well-calibrated 1080p display with full sRGB coverage, but it doesn't get very bright, so it isn't the best for outdoor use. Its port selection is great and includes a full-size HDMI and a USB-C port with Thunderbolt for support. Its Intel Core i5 CPU is powerful enough for general productivity like web browsing, text formatting, and spreadsheets, and it can even handle some heavier workloads like photo and video editing. However, its integrated Iris-Say graphics struggles in graphically demanding tasks like games and 3D rendering. Unfortunately, the keyboard is tiring to type on for long periods, and its layout might take some time to get used to. Also, it has a small touchpad and a bad webcam. Our Acer Swift 3 has an Intel Core i5-1135 G7 CPU. Integrated Iris-Say graphics, 8GB of RAM, and 512GB of storage. The only other CPU option is the Intel Core i7-1165 G7, which will perform better overall, although we expect the performance difference to be minimal. You can upgrade the memory up to 16GB, but only on the models with an i7 CPU. The Acer Swift 3 is good for school use. It's a well-built laptop that's easy to carry around, with plenty of battery life to last through a typical school day. The keyboard is decent, but it may take some time to get used to the layout, and it can be tiring to type on for long periods. Unfortunately, the touchpad is on the smaller side, and the webcam is bad. Its Intel 11th Gen CPU performs well and can handle relatively heavy workloads. However, its integrated GPU isn't ideal for graphically demanding tasks, which might disappoint students in fields like 3D animation or graphic design. The Acer Swift 3 is mediocre for gaming. Since it's a productivity-focused laptop, it only has a 60Hz display with a slow response time and no VRR support. Also, even though its Intel 11th Gen CPU is quite capable, its integrated GPU isn't powerful enough to handle graphically demanding AAA titles. There's some thermal throttling under load, but on the upside, it doesn't get hot or loud. The Acer Swift 3 is decent for media consumption. It's very portable because it has a thin profile and is lightweight, and its battery lasts a long time, enough to get you through a couple of full-length movies. It has a reasonably well-calibrated display with full sRGB coverage, but it doesn't get very bright, and like most IPS panels, it isn't ideal for dark rooms. The speakers sound good overall, however, they have almost no bass, so they aren't the best for listening to music. The Acer Swift 3 is decent for use as a workstation. Its Intel 11th Gen CPU can handle some heavy workloads. However, it loses some performance over time due to thermal throttling, and its integrated GPU isn't powerful enough for graphically demanding tasks. Also, its memory runs in single-channel mode and isn't user upgradable. On the upside, it has a fast NVMe SSD and a great port selection that includes a full-size HDMI and a USB-C port with Thunderbolt for support. The Acer Swift 3 is decent for business use. It's a thin and light laptop that's easy to carry around, with a battery that lasts through a typical 8-hour workday with plenty of charge to spare. Its great port selection includes a full-size HDMI and a USB-C port with Thunderbolt for support so that you can connect to an external display for presentations.
Its Intel 11th Gen CPU can handle general productivity tasks like text formatting and Excel spreadsheets, and it doesn't throttle much under load.
Unfortunately, the keyboard feels tiring to type on for extended periods, and the webcam's video and audio quality are bad.
Number 4. Dell G15. The Dell G15 is a budget gaming laptop available with Intel 12th Gen CPUs and NVIDIA dedicated GPUs.
It's the 5520 model, and it replaces the Dell G15 5511 from 2021 with Intel 11th Gen processors. It looks almost identical to its predecessor, with the biggest change being Intel's 12th Gen Alder Lake CPUs, which sport a new hybrid architecture with a mix of performance and efficiency cores.
Other changes include the addition of a QHD 240Hz display and an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 Ti GPU option,
as well as Thunderbolt for support on models with an RTX 3060 and 3070 Ti.
There are also more color options, including an Obsidian Black Special Edition with an aluminum lid.
There are variants with AMD Ryzen 6000 series CPUs, known as the Dell G15 5525, and they replace the Dell G15 5515 with AMD Ryzen 5000 series CPUs. Our Dell G15 has an Intel Core i5-12500H CPU, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 GPU, 8GB of memory,
and 256GB of storage.
You can upgrade the CPU to an Intel Core i7-12700H, which has 2 additional performance cores. The NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 is the base GPU configuration. If you want better performance, you can upgrade to an RTX 3050 Ti, RTX 3060, or RTX 3070 Ti.
You can configure the laptop with up to 32GB of memory and 1TB of storage in the form of a PCIe NVMe SSD.
There are also multiple display options, including a 1080p 120Hz, a 1080p 165Hz, and a 1440p 240Hz panel.
Number 3. Microsoft Surface Pro 8. The Microsoft Surface Pro 8 is a Windows tablet PC with a built-in kickstand and detachable keyboard.
It's easy to take around since it's thin and lightweight, yet it feels sturdy, with excellent build quality. Even though the type-cover keyboard is thin, it feels satisfying to type on and doesn't cause fatigue over extended periods. It has a very bright, vibrant, and sharp display which supports dynamic refresh rate to balance performance with battery life, ramping up to 120 Hz for smooth scrolling and cursor movements. Also, its tall 3:2 aspect ratio provides more vertical room, allowing you to scroll less when formatting text or reading articles. It has an outstanding webcam and microphone that records clear, detailed video and crisp audio, so it's great for video conferences. It only has 2 USB-C ports, so you'll need to use dongles for your wired peripherals, but they both support USB 4 and Thunderbolt 4 for fast data transfer rates and high-resolution video output. Unfortunately, its battery can't get through a full 8-hour workday, and since you can't get it with any dedicated GPUs, it isn't suitable for serious gamers or professionals who need lots of graphical horsepower. We tested the Surface Pro 8 with an Intel Core i7-1185G7, integrated Intel Iris Xe graphics G7, 16GB of RAM,
and a 256GB SSD. You can also get it with an i5-1135G7 CPU, 8GB or 32GB of RAM, and up to a 1TB SSD. If you only need a device to run light productivity tasks, the base model with an i5, 8GB of RAM, and a 128GB SSD will be more than enough to power through your typical workday while remaining lightweight and usable as a tablet. The highest-end i7 option with 32GB of RAM and a 1TB SSD is suitable for heavy multitaskers and people who store lots of local files. However, it'll likely be overkill for most people, especially since you can't equip it with any dedicated GPUs for very demanding tasks that utilize all the system's available resources. Number 2. HP Pavilion X36014. The HP Pavilion X36014 is a convertible laptop with a 360-degree hinge that's available in a variety of different configurations. Its plastic chassis feels solid and decently built, and since it's lightweight and compact, it's easy to bring along with you. The user experience is decent overall thanks to its smooth touchpad, good-sized keyboard, and decently loud, neutral-sounding speakers.
The port selection is great, including a dedicated HDMI port and a single USB-C port that supports USB power delivery and display out. Sadly, the battery doesn't last a full 8-hour workday, so you'll need to plug it in at some point. While its IPS display has decent viewing angles overall, it looks washed out and doesn't get bright enough to overcome glare. The microphone picks up voices loudly and clearly, but the webcam is very grainy and loses out on fine details. There aren't any variants with a dedicated GPU, so it isn't suited for AAA gaming. We tested the HP Pavilion X36014 with a 1080p IPS display, an Intel Core i3-1125G4 with integrated Intel UHD graphics G4, 8GB of RAM, and a 256GB SSD. It's suitable for light to medium multitasking thanks to its quad-core CPU and its good amount of RAM, and its performance in 3D rendering is good enough for enthusiasts looking to get into the activity, but not for professionals. If you tend to have many apps and browser tabs open, we suggest you opt for a model with 16GB of RAM to avoid slowdowns or stutters. The lowest-end options with the dual-core Pentium Gold 7505 CPU will be more than enough for light web browsing or video playback. While the highest-end Intel Core i7-1165G7 options will give a smooth experience for heavy multitaskers and enough power for people who need to run CPU-heavy applications. Number 1. Lenovo Legion 5 Gen 615. The Lenovo Legion 5 Gen 615 is a lower mid-range gaming laptop. It's a step above the budget-oriented Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 but sits below the Legion 5 Pro and the Legion 7 in Lenovo's lineup. It's very similar to the IdeaPad Gaming 3 in design, user experience, and configuration options. However, it has an additional QHD display option in GPUs like the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 and the AMD Radeon RX 6600M GPU. Unlike IdeaPad Gaming 3, the Legion 5 sports a MUX switch, and its GPUs run at a higher wattage, allowing for better performance. Our Lenovo Legion 5 has an AMD Ryzen 5 5600H CPU, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050, 95W, dedicated GPU, 8GB of memory, and 256GB of storage. If you need better multi-thread performance, you can upgrade the CPU to an AMD Ryzen 7 5800H, which has more cores and threads. The NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1650 is the lowest-end GPU option and can provide a 60 frames per second gaming experience at 1080p, though you'll have to play at low settings in most games. The RTX 3050 and 3050 Ti are very similar and will get you around or slightly above 60 frames per second with medium or high settings, with the 3050 Ti being only marginally better. The RTX 3060 is faster than the RTX 3050, providing a 35 to 40% performance boost over the RTX 3050. The AMD Radeon RX 6600M is roughly the equivalent of an RTX 3060. The performance will vary depending on each game's optimization. The RTX 3070 is the highest-end GPU available and the best option to pair with the QHD 165Hz display. Our recommendations above are what we think are currently the best cheap and budget laptops you can get. We factor in the price. A cheaper laptop wins over a pricier one if the difference isn't worth it. Feedback from our visitors, and availability: no laptops that are difficult to find or almost out of stock everywhere. If you prefer to make your own decision, here's the list of all of our laptop reviews, sorted by price from low to high. Keep in mind that most laptops are available in various configurations, and the table only shows the results of the model we tested, so it's best to see the full review for information about other variants.